Here in Florida, we have something special we never enjoyed at Disneyland, the blessing of size. There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. Right now, our plans include an airport of the future down here in Osceola County.
Wait a minute, did he just say airport at Walt Disney World?
Right now, our plans include an airport of the future down here in Osceola County.
Yeah, he did. Let's delve into that a little bit further. In the early 1960s, the Bronson family of the Earlo Bronson fame, they had actually built a small little airport called the Airlando Airport, that's as in air, Lando. That was a grass field. They had basically carved out some trees and actually created a grass field where they could land small aircraft. And this happened to be in the area where Walt Disney points to on the map. So if you want to kind of take it literally, he was actually thinking of his airport being down there in that same area. When Walt Disney first started looking at the property, he had a realization that it was going to be difficult for anyone to get to that property from anywhere else. There weren't very many airports around. In fact, there was a small airport in Kissimmee that could service the area. There was also an airport in Orlando that was very close to where Orlando International is now. It was called the Orlando Municipal Airport, but it was really only serviced with small planes. And then there was the Sanford Airport, which is about 30 miles northeast of Orlando. That was a bigger airport that could service more of the types of planes that might be coming in to bring guests into the area. And so this was a problem for Walt Disney. The Orlando International Airport didn't start to get built up until after he started building the Walt Disney World Resort. As it started to grow, it became Orlando International, but it was actually the offshoot of McCoy Airfield, which was a Strategic Air Command air base named after a person named McCoy. That's why the initials for it are MCO, because it's the McCoy Airfield. It wasn't decommissioned as an airfield until 1975 when it became a fully operational international airport. So while there was train service that regularly serviced the Kissimmee area, getting airplanes of any decent size to Central Florida was going to be a challenge. So the solution to the problem was right before him. He wanted to create an airport in the property that he was actually developing. So he would have an airfield that he could land planes at to make things easier. So he started to develop something. It actually was designated as the DWS. I believe that stands for Disney World Stollport, but it was known as the Lake Buena Vista Airfield. Now, if you look at some of the early Walt Disney World maps from the early 1970s, 71, 72, you'll see that there's an airport that's listed there. It's the Lake Buena Vista Airfield that's actually listed there, and it shows a little airplane, and it shows that people are coming and going. So it's kind of an interesting thing that it actually was intended to be used that way. So I mentioned that there was a short takeoff and landing runway that's here at the Walt Disney World Resort. The intent was to see if Disney could get into the airplane business and the airport business and help people get to his Epcot Center, to the experimental prototype city. If you're going to build a research park, you need an easy way for businesses to be able to get here other than taking the bus, driving, whatever they're going to do. So having a small airport here would allow for small aircraft to come in and land here. Now, eventually, he at least considered the possibility that it could become a larger scale airport and could handle and accommodate larger aircraft. But for the short term, the idea was to allow for smaller aircraft to land there, things on the order of a Gulfstream, which would be like the kind of size that you would see from a corporation. So that made a lot of sense. Now, I realize the Gulfstreams in the early days were a little bit different than the ones we think of today, but that's the idea. So a short takeoff and landing airport is only about 2,000 feet in length, and that's why you can't land a larger aircraft there. But having the small aircraft would actually work pretty well. Now, they did actually pilot the program shortly, a little bit with Eastern Airlines, had a partner that could fly people from the Orlando International Airport directly to the, they called it the Lake Buena Vista Field, and that was actually the place where it was located, in Lake Buena Vista. Now, where is it physically located? Well, actually, it's very near where the main entrance is to the Transportation and Ticket Center. When you're coming into the Magic Kingdom and you go through the gate, it's actually off to the side, but you can't see it from the road. The tree line is too great. So the only way you can really see it is on the monorail. And if you take the monorail to Epcot, it goes up and around, and you have a decent view at least to one end of the runway. You can't see the whole runway because the tree line is still too great, even though you're up higher. But at least you can see part of it. So let's take a ride on the monorail and we'll see what we can see.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World monorail to Epcot.
Yeah,
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the road. For the comfort of others, no smoking, please. As we turn south,
So I said it was a STOL port. That is a short takeoff and landing airport. That means that the runway was shorter than a traditional airport, so you could only land smaller planes there. Things like the Beechcraft, or perhaps as large as a Gulfstream that you might think of today. Around that size would be about the largest you could land there. So it really wasn't appropriate for a larger scale aircraft, and it was unclear at the time how it was going to be used. Now, it was really just a test case to see if this was going to work or not. It was sort of a plan to figure out whether it might work, and they could develop a full-scale airport around it. Since Walt talked about it in his promotional video, you have to believe that this was actually something they had planned, and they were going to bring people into the area. They might bring in tourists, they might bring in workers, but I think the intent was to bring people down to make it easy for them to be able to get to the Walt Disney World property and be able to get around. And so the Lake Buena Vista Airfield was commissioned in about 1971. Now, there's a story that Walt Disney landed his plane there at least twice during the development of Disney World. But I don't see how that's entirely possible given the fact that he died in '67 and the airport didn't actually come into existence until 1971. Now, it's possible that he had an airstrip that he landed on and didn't actually land at the STOL port as it was, and instead just landed in a temporary type of airport. But it's also possible that the Disney company used several aircraft, perhaps even Walt's aircraft, to land there a couple of times during construction, and the stories may have gotten conflated and it became something else, and it's said that Walt landed there, though he never actually did. I'm not sure which one of those is true, but I think the fact that the timing is what it is would make me believe something else. Now, there's another little piece of a story here where they said they built grooves into part of the runway. So as a plane would go along at about 45 miles an hour, it would actually play the tune of When You Wish Upon a Star. So a plane that was landing and coming over toward the terminal building you would have actually heard the tune When You Wish Upon a Star as it was moving along. The Walt Disney Company stopped using this airport completely and totally in about 1980 as they were building the Epcot spur line for the monorail to go near where the airport is. So even though it hadn't been used since about 1973, it was still listed as an active airport in the FAA's registry. So today, it's used as a storage space, and you have a lot of containers that are out there for a lot of construction activities that are happening around the Walt Disney World Resort. You can actually access the parking lot area where the terminal would have been at one end of the airport. I'm not going to tell you how to get there. You'll have to figure it out on your own, but it is accessible in some ways. The airline that picked up the traffic was a small outfit called Shawnee Airlines, and it was an affiliate of Eastern Airlines, which was the official carrier of Walt Disney World. So they were successful in bringing people to the airfield for some period of time. But through acquisitions and mergers, they actually were taken out of the market at some point in about 1972 and couldn't provide service anymore to the airfield. One of the reasons that Disney went out of the business and stopped providing service there was financial. It was going to cost them something to run that airport and have many people working at that airport and have to comply with the FAA rules and all of the passenger carriage rules and all the things that were going on in the airline industry at that point. So Disney needed a corporate sponsor that could build the airport and actually help provide financial support for it. So this was a real challenge for Disney, and with the oil embargo and the gas crisis of the early 1970s, this became even more complicated, and it just didn't make sense for Disney to get in that business. And it actually worked out to their advantage in the long run, but it took a while to get there. And that's the story of the Walt Disney World Airstrip, or as it was known, the Lake Buena Vista Airfield. I do have to wonder, if Epcot had been developed the way it was intended, if this had become something more, if they'd have built something greater there or grander there, if it had actually come to fruition in some way, I guess we'll never know.